you to communicate better with them during the game. So, start.
Sure. I think you've already addressed this, but the biggest thing is, say there's a call that we have a question about, and sometimes with the flow of the game, you're not able to answer things right away. You want to keep the game flow going. Even just a comment of, Coach, I'll come to you during the next time out. I think that it's a huge difference, just knowing that you're, acknowledging our concern, and though you don't have time now, you can come back later.
And again, that's the FIBA mechanic that we have where we go away and then, we talk about that center official.
And sometimes I don't think, sorry to interrupt, sometimes I don't think that mechanic's bad, because if somebody gets heated, I think it gives a second to cool down.
Yeah.
But as long as you come back,
right.
I think that makes a difference.
Sure. Gus? Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the first interaction of any game is usually when the referees come out on the court, which is supposed to be like 15 minutes. So I don't think anybody's really thinking about that interaction before that moment. As soon as that moment occurs, I think that's the most important moment. That first initial interaction with the officials. One of the things that really gets me upset is when an official comes to the game late and then they tell your players to remove their stuff. It's like, well, you're now ruling, but you didn't even follow your own rule. So then people just get upset right at the beginning, and then it becomes confrontational. And I know it's our responsibility to make sure our players have the similar colors underneath. And I to be honest, I still don't understand what that rule is all about. I don't understand. It's very confusing because all the different levels of ball and all that stuff with the little kids and OSBA and call. I don't understand. So, but when your first interaction is a negative of nature, it sort of sets the tone, I feel, for the rest of the game, and people get their back up and get upset.
First, I want to say that this summer, when I ran CYBL, there was probably, 800 games in the summer, and Tabo did a great job reffing those overall. So I want to congratulate our board, because CYBL is in many boards across the GTA, and I will say that not all the boards do a great job. So I had minimal issues, although in terms of communications, when I'm sitting there, and I know everyone who comes in the summer, so I find a lot of the times when, and you know that, and we have some coaches that are winning the NBA championship. So, at grade 4. So it's end of world everything. So I often find that meeting fire with not fire creates a calmness. So for example, if the coach is yelling and swearing at you, when you address him calmly, if he doesn't calm down, we have our next step to take, right? Technical to calm him down. But I find sometimes we're greeting him or her with, you're catching feelings, that's how my players say it. And so you're taking it personally, which I understand, because someone's screaming at you, you're shit, da-da-da-da-da. You take it personally, so you come at them personally, and now you're arguing. And that's not, I think coaches, they have to be checked in terms of, your behavior is not appropriate. My behavior is like a little kid. My behavior is going to be appropriate. Not going to match yours. So if you can't match mine, then the next step is probably a technical or whatever. It's usually in terms of the summer when you guys have had issues is when the coach just starts off that way, and then they're going like this, and they've not been put in their place properly. Other than that, like Gus said, I think, when officials are not communicating or coming up and tell you that they don't understand the call, although some of these coaches want every explanation, that's not possible, right? You got to pick and choose when you want to tell them what the issue was. Otherwise, they have you talking, and the game takes forever to go on, and that's not what we want either. So positive. I found that if you come at them calmly, despite what they're saying, despite if they're yelling and screaming and swearing, that if they don't stop at that point, then you go to the next. And if you can't talk to them, maybe your partner can. So maybe you have to step away and let your partner, you go talk to your partner, let the partner handle it, and so forth. Same as this, I think that's what most of them want. Even though they don't like it, it's better than you arguing with them. in terms of, you can't convince someone who knows the right answer, so you got to move away. But that's about it.
I appreciate it. So first of all, I just want to thank Bobby, Farhan, Falloon for inviting me out here. I appreciate it. I think definitely moving in the right direction, having these guys out here. So I guess a little bit of a different perspective from the coaches now to kind of a convener for multiple different leagues. So I'll start with, so yesterday I did 23 games at the Pan Am Center, meaning OBL games. And when we talk about communication, I think back to it's both ways as well with the coaches. So yesterday there was a situation where ref blew the whistle. I can't remember what the call was, and the coach's immediate reaction was, "Are you blind? What are you watching? What are you doing?" So as a convener now, my job is to support you guys and the officials first. And do I give that coach the time of day because that's how he wants to act and that's his response to it? Versus another game where the coach actually, it was a U12 girls game. I think it was like Division F. And the coach actually, pardon my French here, but he knew his shit. He was like, did he displace her? Did he impede his forward motion? I'm sitting there going, you know what? Let him talk a little bit more, because he, obviously he's read something. Maybe he's a bit of a keener, so I gave him a little bit more time to talk. And I think that's where it's getting better, but it also, we could take it to another level in terms of coaches understanding the jargon when we talk about the basketball language. And finding ways to get that education piece out to them. Coaches are investing a lot of time in this, and I think for them it's just giving them that that conversation when they need it. And again, like Ben said, you can't do it all the time, but when you can, just go and talk to them. As a convener, I try to be the the intermediary between the two. So when using your body language, when do I walk on the court, when do I stay away? And how do you be the guy to balance all these two things? So, one thing that I'll look at is first, does the coach even have the grounds to really kind of go at the official for anything, or is it more so, is he just looking for everything to complain about? Some of the guys in here, I know, do my men's league in the summertime, Division I stuff, and you're not dealing with one coach, you're dealing with like 10 players who all played in the NBA, like Ben said, for 12 years, a couple NBA championships, and everything to them is a foul and everything's not a foul. So, it's always balancing, again, when you step in, when you don't step in. And again, not to undermine you guys, but to show support that, these guys are here, they're in the right spots, they're working hard. Something actually, Ben does well when he's there is he knows some of the players, so it helps saying, hey, Tyrone, that's not a foul, this is why, and things like that. So again, communication on the fly as well as can help with that as well.
Okay, great, thanks. So a couple of things that talk to Ben's point, right? And Ben's absolutely right. If we're going to communicate and the coach is continually asking, why is that not a foul? Like, I'm going to address that. Okay, the coach, I can't explain every call. Okay, and I'll tell him you need to pick the ones that are really contentious, and then we'll come and talk to you. So, we're looking at the official side of it, and I'm going to put you all on the spot, and Gus, you're going to be the first one I'm going to ask, okay? So, do you work officials? Like to try to get the next call. Do you and this is something that this is their job, right? This is their job. But and so I ask, do you work officials?
I actually don't work officials,
Okay.
to be honest. For the people that have ref me, it's very rare that I do that, because I actually, when you watch film, and a lot of in the OSBA anyway, it's not so much maybe in the high school game because they don't have the resources per se, but in the OSBA we have access to crossover. So on the men's and women's side, we watch everything. So we know what the other team's running. We know everything about personnel, what if they foul, how they foul, all the calls that everyone makes. Like we give a scouting report on the officials' calls, and we know which refs are going to be and how they call. So it's all on film. And when you watch film, you actually you feel bad because you yelled about something that the referee was right probably 97% of the time.
Yeah, we'd like to send you those clips.
Yeah. The fight fire with fire thing that Ben said is actually it stuck out in my mind. The only time I do work officials is when I feel like a coach that has that mentality, that thinks that every single call is right, like that should be right on their behalf. And I feel like if the benefit of the doubt is going to that coach, then that's when you have to sort of try to balance the thing out. And I feel like refereeing the middle and not refereeing the extremes is very, very important. So I don't try to work the officials. I don't see the benefit of it in the long run. I think people get tired of hearing you, and actually you won't get any calls. So I feel like just having that middle ground approach is very appropriate. The one time it kind of goes down really quick is if, you know, on the other side you have somebody that is constantly complaining, like even if they get the block call, they're still complaining. And then maybe they get the very next call and the next call, that's when you sort of have to now ramp up your ability to sort of voice yourself, because at the end of the game you lose, you go back and you're sitting there watching film and you're saying, man, like why am I being the nice guy? And the other person just got all the benefit because he was the loudest person in the room. So again, if I was to officiate, and I did officiate for 10 years, if I was to go back and officiate again, the person that like is the most annoying, I'd probably like not give them a call, because I want them to realize, like, you know, if you're a little bit better, if you're more reasonable, you'll get a benefit of a small whistle. That'll help you, and hopefully that'll, you know, make the kind of hearts and minds change. You know, because oftentimes the loudest voice is the one that's listened to the most, and I don't think it should be like that. And we don't want to teach our players that as well. If you start, you know, questioning everything, then they're going to question everything, and they're going to question you as a coach on everything as well. So it's a learning thing in general. So no, I don't believe in working officials at all.
Great. Thanks. I'm just going to address your point. So when I have coaches that are constantly yelling and things like that, I will communicate to them. Your constant yelling and asking questions is not helping us as a crew, and I leave it at that. Okay, and whether they take that in or whether they continue, it's out there. It's not help, and I will communicate that to a coach. Coach, how about yourself? Do you work officials?
When I've been a head coach, no. I never really worked officials, but I think it's also because I know a lot of the officials that have done my games, who've refereed me in middle school, high school, when I played at Humber. So I think the rapport, what we were talking about before with communication, played a huge aspect of it. I also understand, like you guys said, no one referees the perfect game, no one plays the perfect game, and we certainly don't coach the perfect game. And I also don't think there's a vendetta. I think some people think referees are personally making calls against them, and I think if you have that kind of mindset going into the game, then that changes the game feel. But I do think at Humber, not to speak for AJ, but if they're, same thing as Gus is saying, if you feel a certain couple of calls like are not being called, like 3 seconds in the key, and they're being called against us, he'll go and he'll make a comment. But at the end of the day, we know when the whistle is blown, it's not going to change the call, and it's not going to change the game flow. So.
Dan, how about yourself? You're an official that works officials.
Yeah, so I try not to talk to officials for the most part. If I do, I try to just on the side talk to them, but because I'm a Tabo official, I'm not, you know, there's very few times. When I was younger, I probably did, because I was younger. But as I'm older now, I try to just focus on my team. In the summer, I coached one of the grade 8 teams, you know, Canada Elite teams. They're very good. Most of the time, I didn't even look at the score. Let it, because if you're in hoopdom, you can't see the score. So I try not to focus on officials, even when I'm at Centennial. The difference being when you're in college, though, is you have officials from out of town. So when I have our GTA officials, I know most of you, so I say, hey, what's up, da-da-da-da. I know assistants are not to talk to referees technically, so I try to, if I do talk to them, it's quietly. But sometimes I have a hard time watching some of the stuff I see right now at college from officials outside of our board. You know, they don't have the same experience that you guys have, just because some of you guys may never coach a college game, but you could do a high-level high school game. And it's, although the physicality might not be the same, the skill set is often similar. Because in that high level, like if you did an OSBA game, you have potential D1 players in that game, right? So those guys are similar. Whereas when you're out of our board, you're doing junior boys, and then you're doing a college game. and so it's a vast difference. So you get frustrated. I know our coach, he does work officials a little bit quietly. He's not a yeller, but most of the time, what gets him going is consistency, right? They've talked about consistency in terms of what's being called on both ends. I'm okay. I think as a board we've talked about before. If this is what you guys are calling in terms of a hand check down here, regardless of what the handbook says, well, okay, that's what it's being called for the game. It's just that sometimes coaches will get very frustrated when that's not what's happening, right? When consistency starts going out the window, then they get very frustrated, and then they'll start working the officials. But I think most of the coaches, as I know in the CYBL in the summer, they're working officials and they're screaming all the time. And I try to tell them, I'm as a convener too, because I'm there. When there's a tough game, I try to get over there and talk to them and say, hey, you got to take your tone down. Especially when there's young kids. You shouldn't have coaches swearing and stuff like that. We can't control how they coach, but we can control their behavior because that's our job. Right? It's part of game management. Now, if they can't control themselves, then maybe they need to exit the game. And I'm all for that. As a convener, I come up, and if I see a guy, and he's coaching grade 5 girls or boys, and he's swearing F-bombs all over, and he's yelling at you, and he's yelling at this, it's only going to incite his players and the parents. The parents are worse, right? If you don't control that coach now, the parents are going to go insane, because they're already insane, because all their kids are getting scholarships next year. So, like, the ref, they'll probably work you, but like Dave said, pick and choose when you talk. I know that coaches that talk to you all the time, like Gus has it right. You shut your ear off to them after a while, right? I know when I was younger, or when I ref a game and guys are going, foul, travel, 3 in the key, and I come up to the coach and say, coach the game, and I'll ref the game, right? Like, I'm not coaching, you're not. So I'll just say, thank you, but stop, because it gets annoying and it only incites everybody. It goes from him down to the bench and right into the stands. And then now you have 1,000 officials yelling at you, and it gets to be annoying.
So again, I guess my take's a little different. One of the techniques that I've started using a little bit more is kind of when it comes to, I see a coach kind of always asking or complaining and things like that. I'll ask him just to talk to the other official, or at his time when there's a timeout, have his assistant coach talk to the players, and he comes and talks to the officials as opposed to holding up the game. From my point of view, we got to keep things on time and keep things moving. So I think that's one of the techniques that I've started using, is having the assistant coach during the timeouts talk to the players, and the head coach can approach the officials at that time. So we're not slowing the game down, keep things on time, and he gets to answer his question or ask his questions and get some answers out of it.
Questions from the members? No? Okay. Go ahead.
Hey, Artaban here. What are some of the best lines you heard when you tell the referee the foul count is 5-0?
Yes, you want to say?
I think, so I'll answer that in 2 ways, I think. I say that a lot. So, I do. That's one of the things I say a lot, and I go back to Ben's consistency piece. I think what's really, really important, actually I can answer that question in 3 ways. Number one, the most important thing about officiating in my perspective is it's a little bit more challenging in 3-person because you have an additional person there. Is the crew on the same page? Are all 3 officials of a similar nature and level, and are they seeing the same thing? Or are you trying to throw the other guy under the bus to make yourself look better? And because I feel like the most important team is the referee, is the officiating team. And what happens in terms of when the foul count swells one way or the other, you might have one official seeing the game one particular way, and then the other guy maybe not seeing it the same way, or is not as strong, or is less experienced. And I feel like that's kind of the challenging part when the foul count goes one way or the other. I feel like you also, as officials, have to recognize style of play of teams. So you know, we had a challenging game the other day, like us versus Henry Carr, right? So Henry Carr likes to press, trap. They're very physical. They like to run up and down, and that's the way they want to play. We want to play like a more controlled style, you know, more pack line defense, and just kind of use the shot clock and, you know, do that. So there's different philosophies. One team's going to inherently foul more than the other because of style of play. Like when you're just more physical and you're up and down, it's just easier to get the hand check and all that. So you, on one side, you're going to hear somebody saying, that's not a foul. And on the other side, you're going to hear somebody saying, that's a foul. And normally, you know, whichever voice kind of, you know, the refs are listening to, or whatever way the game is going to be called that day, in that particular instance, that's the team that's going to come out on top. You know, and it gets really challenging, you know, as officials to kind of go through that and kind of process, was a foul, or is it not a foul? And how much should I let go? You know, the whole advantage versus disadvantage thing, and how do we officiate more powerful athletes versus the weaker athletes, because a more powerful athlete can kind of get through that physicality and still make the layup, but they may not in the fourth quarter. So, you know, are we allowing things to occur or not? And that's a really, really difficult thing to have to navigate in terms of foul count. I think at the end of the day, I think that if the foul count is similar in nature and not swollen one way or the other, then I feel like at the end of the day, that's probably what's best. Although you don't really want to penalize a team either that's doing things well and not fouling, moving their feet and all that. You know, that's a challenging question. You know, at the end of the day, I think you got to use your feel and judgment. I think that the three officials have to be on the same page in terms of the way the game is being called. And then if it kind of swells one way or the other and not too extreme, then I think it's okay.
So this might just be a perspective from our end, but over the last few years, we've been really strong at Humber, and we feel sometimes when a weaker team might be coming in, that because of the game flow and, you know, the running up of the score, that the balancing of the fouls and trying to slow the game down, and I don't know if the right term is helping the other team out, but we feel that sometimes because of how much stronger we are than another team, that the foul counts do become lopsided. And it's not to say that we aren't playing aggressive, which we do, even though we are going towards more of a pack line style. But I think that's why sometimes we say something like that. That's something we say quite often. It's 9-2 in the second half, like, you know what I mean? But
you're up by 50.
We're up by 50, but we still want the foul calls because we don't want our kids to get injured. But we understand that you don't want to stop the game and keep the game going. So I think there's a balancing act there, right? It's kind of hard because we've seen times where, you know, it gets a little out of control because of the fact that we are up 50, 60, or whatever it is, but the fouls aren't being called, and then girls end up getting injured. So I don't really know what to do with that. It's tough.
I could jump on that if I may. I feel like when we travel to the U.S., I feel like it's like foul counts are like 20-0. Like it doesn't matter. They don't care. I feel like here it seems that balancing out a little bit more, and it's just a different, and maybe in philosophy, maybe Canadian versus American mentality. It's a little different, but we do get that experience. So I would understand exactly what you're talking about in that.
I think we're starting to go away from that. In my opinion, you know, with sort of the people that we have that are sort of leading us now. Oh yeah. So I think we're kind of going away from that. You know, you talk about styles of play and things like that. You know, we're starting to go away from that. I know maybe, you know, 10 years ago it was, you know, when I first started, it was all talk about foul count. Okay, but again, styles of play sometimes dictate foul counts, and probably the one thing that I don't communicate to a coach is that if they think we missed a call, I don't communicate the score because I want them to know that I'm not refereeing the score. I communicate that with my crew, okay? And getting us all on the same page is the biggest challenge of three-man officiating, and that's why a good pregame, good talk, good communication between the officials really helps the game out. But I'm not gonna lie, I try not to referee foul counts. I tell my crew try not to referee foul counts because sometimes styles of play dictate foul counts. However, when we go back to the tape, we want to be consistent, right? We want to be, and whether it's this score or this score, and listen, I'll be in within my crew, and I'm telling them, you know, score is way out of whack. We need to protect players, so keep calling fouls, because the last thing that we want to do is that in a game that's lopsided in score is to say, okay, I'm not going to call foul, and then somebody gets hurt. That's on us, right? So we
Just sorry to add on to that.
Even though it might be great in Toronto, when we go on the road, which is something obviously you guys can't control,
Right.
it becomes very lopsided. Like last weekend when we were in the Sioux, right? Like.
So as a province, we're trying.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can tell you, there's a concerted effort to get all officials across the province sort of on the same page. Toronto has the luxury of refereeing. We have the luxury of refereeing all kinds of ball all the time. So we have, you know what? I'm not kidding. This is one of the reasons I joined Toronto, is because of the progressive education that's going on. So we have an opportunity to, you know, not only lead our fellow officials, but help lead the province in sort of, you know, what we need to call.
But then going towards, and I'm not sure how it gets chosen, but for our OCAAs or for our nationals, I feel like there's like a balancing act of where you guys draw officials from. So once we get to that level and there's referees that aren't refereeing high-level games throughout the whole year, we're getting that same lopsidedness in the time of playoffs.
Okay, so that's a whole nother
I know,
presentation.
That's after
And I have and I can go on about that too.
Fair enough.
Arnivan,
Politics.
nobody answered your question, right? The funniest answer I heard from Joey Crawford, he said, "Coach, I'm not math major. I don't count."
Okay, a question in the front here.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering the degree to which we pick these kind of important moments, beginning of the game, as a way to establish a rapport of some sort, and how we mitigate that throughout the game, whether or not you approach the coach or you do not approach the coach, and what sort of, mentality that you carry with you. So my question is, to what degree do we assess personality of the official, as we do as officials often look at the coaches? And sometimes we think, I don't know how real it is, that a convener actually assigns us to work that game because it has to do with the personalities involved. Is there any warning signs there, any red flags for us in terms of how our personality could
I think, yeah, this one's huge for me. I think ego is massive. I think nothing will inflame a situation faster than an official that has a huge ego and is never wrong. I'll tell you something about Dave. I mean, Dave probably doesn't remember this, but he refereed our game. I might be missing the date in the game, but he refereed one of our games, I want to say in Paris, Ontario, maybe, in 2007. I don't know if you remember that, but we were playing Orchard Park. I think we were playing Orchard Park, right? And I know, this is just like a golfer. They'll never forget a hole. Like you remember all the holes. So same with coaches and referees. And he had a very amazing personality. I remember, I'm not trying to say because he doesn't refer OSBA games, so there's no reason to kiss his butt, but I remember that having like that calm demeanor, very much like today. And I mean, to this day, I think, you know, a referee like Dave would garner that respect because he had in the most extreme environment, it was close, he still would go like, he'd listen, he'd nod, and that's all he had to say. And I think, you know, you garner much more respect that way. And again, you know, officiate to the middle, and the extreme coaches that are always, they're never wrong, then you need to sort of, put those guys more in their place. But yes, the ego part is huge, and then also having that great demeanor where you put your ego aside and understand it's not personal and people are inflamed in the moment, but it really doesn't last that long. But yeah, so thank you.
It's very true. Just as we as officials walk into a game and you're like, oh my God, this coach is crazy. Right? Let's be honest, you're gonna be like, oh my God, you're looking at your partner and then you're hoping that he's as senior as you because this guy is gonna be insane the whole game. The coaches are looking at us the same way, right? They're saying, okay, so it's coming, oh my God, this guy's gonna call foul after foul after foul, right? They're doing the exact same thing. So when I have Northern Kings playing Brampton, right? I know that I have to have a certain type of official on that game because I know both coaches are going to be working you constantly. The parents are going to be screaming constantly. The kids are going to be doing the same thing. And so I need someone who's very calm and has the situation. Dave pointed out something. It's what you say to them that can save you or sink you. If you give them information that's wrong, you're done for the game. If you don't know your rules and you say to them something that you're not sure of, you're going to be in trouble. They don't care what you say the rest of the game. You told me that you can't do this over here on an out of bounds. That's not true. And then you remember that, oh, that's not right. Right? They don't hear anything you say for the rest of the game. If you had a bad day, we've always talked about this from the moment I started reffing here a long time ago, and I listen in our meetings, like, we all have baggage from outside, and you have a bad day, and I've had officials talk to coaches like their kids. You cannot talk to them like that, and the minute you do, you are going to have a tough day, especially in certain leagues, and it might only be grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but these are some kids who are really good, and the coaches are, some of them know what they're talking about, not all, but some of them, and they think they do. So if I find that your personality is definitely suited for, like I know, and I'm sure Ryan will reiterate that, when a game comes up, I might be calling Mike, like, Mike, who do you have on this game? Because and you'll probably see me standing by the game because I already know I'm going to have to be the third official telling these coaches, hey, sit down, calm down, or whatever, because just to help you, because we don't need it to get out of hand. Even when you're calm, sometimes they're still nuts, right? So, and the vice versa. I've seen guys come in or girls come in and I'm like, I don't, when I'm a convener, I don't tell refs, like they'll say to me, Ben, you gotta tell them no, I'm not reffing. I'm just here to manage the heat of the everyone around the game, and then if the coaches get out of hand, I'll say, don't worry, I'll take that part so you guys can, as a buffer, I'm trying to support whatever the officials are doing on the floor. But I do have a hard time though when you've already told somebody something wrong or you're arguing with them instead of already been kind of using our technical fouls, and which is a much, they don't like it, but we can't have arguments going on the floor. We can't have disrespect going on back and forth. It might come from one side, but it can't come from our side, and I'm talking as an official. So, like, your personality definitely dictates what's going to happen in this game. Because as we look at coaches, we all do it. Like today, you guys going to coach games. Ref games, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, last time this guy he's a screamer. He's not a screamer. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. He knows all the rules. He knows no rules. Right? We know the coaches. Some of you guys are doing over 100 games a year. You're going to see these guys. So it's important that the personality, I know for a fact that I'll look around the gym and after a day's over, I'll call Mike or whoever assigned and say, you know what, like we need to have certain type of official on this game just because, and I'll even schedule the heated games. It's a funny phenomenon. I know I'm dropping off topic, but games that are in Hoop Dome, less happens. Like there's more screaming, but the coaches and parents, you can't hear them and they can't hear you. Whereas I find when I put a heated game in a high school gym on their own, oh my gosh, it's worse. When they're in, it's like the energy's just flowing out. So when everyone's 4 games and tough games are going on, I'll schedule them in Hoop Dome, one, because I'm there. But the parents can't really hear what you're saying to coaches, so they're just like screaming, so they don't get involved. And the coaches sometimes can't hear you all the time, and you can't hear them. So sometimes it just goes on and everyone's all right. But when we're in a small gym, oh man, everyone hears everything and the heat goes up. But that's just my little.
I'll be quick. I know we're pressed for time here, but so to be honest, yeah, 100%. I talk to Falun almost every day with all the games that happen, and you know, especially with the men's league on Sunday nights. Like I'll wait to see who comes in, and it's, I think it's just a relationship, knowing the players and the coaches, and knowing you guys. So I'll see who's who, and I'll say, okay, you know what, this probably makes sense to go over here, and then you guys do this. It could be for a bunch of different reasons, whether it's you know, someone who's, you know, younger in shape and can run up and down because it's going to be a, you know, a high-end game, or it's, you know, they need someone who's going to be a little more strict when, you know, to get these players in check. So it could be a bunch of different reasons, but you know, I think again the support has to come from the conveners to the officials, so that everyone knows that, you know, we're on the same side, and that, you know, we're all working together to make sure that the outcome is not determined by, you know, the whistle. It's determined by the players, and coaches, and things like that.
Okay, there's a quick question over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like you guys to touch on the way the conveners interact with coaches and so forth. It's great that you two gentlemen, and Ben, I know you as well, that you guys do come in and talk to other people. But speaking with other fellow officials, there's a lot of games that conveners are nowhere to be found. They're not addressing the issues. And I think that's a huge part that needs to be worked on with all of us, whether it's the referees, the conveners, coaches. Because you're now getting parents that are screaming, they're swearing, there's U12, U10, and if they're acting like that, how do you expect a child? We're supposed to be assisting them and helping them grow into be fine young men and women. But if they're reacting and speaking in those manners, you know, we gotta work together. I think that's something that really needs to be worked on together.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you wholeheartedly on that. But again, part of that is you know, you know, we talk to the conveners, and we have really good ones, and some, you know, are inexperienced. You know, you go to these OBA, but that's our job to communicate to them. This is our bar. This is what we're gonna put up with. And you know what? And sometimes you're gonna have to you have to communicate. You have to seek out the convener. This is just my own personal opinion, and just say, okay, I'm gonna communicate to you. This is what we're gonna put up with. If they're gonna swear at us, then I'm gonna have to ask you to do your job, right? And just be professional. Okay, so a lot of takeaways from this is, you know, especially about personalities, is our body language, right? You know, if we go in there, you know, chest puffed out, and like, you know, I'm the referee of the day, and things like that. That is the first thing that they pick up on. Okay, first thing that they pick up on. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, very quickly to touch on that, and it's probably not the answer you want to hear first, but I hear it all the time from the executives that there isn't enough officials for all the games that we have. Same concept, there isn't enough conveners for all the games, and it's a battle. So I was at the OB office on Thursday, and it's the same concept. Like, I'm competing 3 gyms. I got 2 at Pan Am, sometimes 3 at Pan Am, and then I got to do Pope across the street. And I'm going back and forth. So just because there isn't enough bodies, and that situation does happen, and that's where I guess, you know, you got to take control of the coaches and just kind of and let them know where it is. But definitely a point of contact for sure is to get to the convener and make sure he understands, you know, what it is and, you know, what's going on, and he can give you some insight too. Like I try to let the guys know, hey, this might be a little bit of a blowout. This team's pretty strong. This might be a close game. This is gonna be tight, just so that they have an understanding going into it. Sometimes you're walking to a gym and it could be blind, like these guys are saying. You could do U12 girls and then go, you know, U19 boys with a shot clock, and it's just a completely different game. So I try to give a little bit of insight when it comes to that stuff.
Evan?
Dave, just a quick question. To the college coaches and Gus, we get the full range of personalities and emotions from the players on the court. I'm just curious to know what you tell the players on how to deal with the officials.
We tell them, do not talk to them. It's very simple. Don't talk to them. Just play the basketball game. Let us handle it. That's all it is.
Let's get coach.
Okay, I tell them the same thing.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Same thing. They're kids. There's life lesson, right? Whatever you make the call, it's not going to change it. Just move on. Next play.
Yeah, not all coaches are like that, I'll tell you that.
You picked 3 good ones.
Going back to the last question on that, I'm starting to see in the last 2 years a lot more coaches who are using language, tone, volume, not necessarily at their referees as much, but at their own players. In a school setting, that would be a CAS call. I don't want to go across that line here because it's really, really vague, but especially if people are convening the younger kids as well. There's possibly no convener. The coach appears out of control, screaming at 11-year-olds. I'm wondering how we communicate without overstepping a very, very fuzzy line on that, or is that something we have to table and go back to later? Because this is a whole basketball problem as opposed to one referee, one coach.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed it a lot lately. That's why I brought it up in terms of the coaches. I mean, you got to remember, swearing in the game is technically, we don't want it, right? So you can go and warn the coach about his language, regardless of if he's swearing at you or the players. If he's just swearing in general, everyone's hearing it. I know as a convener, I've already talked to a few coaches. We're not having that kind of, it reflects the league. I can't have that kind of behavior, and they're little kids. It's one thing too, if they're older, you know, it's whatever. I'm not college coaches, university coach, OSBA. You hope, especially in a high school setting, I mean, your principal's probably in the gym watching games too, so you're flying swear words all over. Doesn't look good, but if he's good with it, that's his school. But I know in our leagues, grade 8 and down, I definitely don't condone it. For the most part in the summer, I think it was better than I noticed through the winter. And again, I noticed it more when we controlled the heat of the game. In the winter, CYBL is not in Toronto very much. This year's a little bit different. And I was just scratching my head at some of the things I saw. And I can't ref when I'm convening. And it's not that, and it wasn't it's partly the calls. But most of it is just controlling the heat of the game. You don't get the game under control right from the get-go. You lose. It's hard to rein it in at the end. And now the coaches already have said, well, you accept me screaming, so now you're telling me not to scream, right? So it's like, well, for 3 quarters I've been screaming at you, and now you're telling me not to scream. Like, from the get-go, it should have been, hey, you want to talk to me, talk to me properly. If you don't want to talk to me, that's okay. I don't want to hear what you have to say, right? But I find that swearing part, I've talked to coaches. Every league's different, because like Ryan will say, like, you might have conveners that's kids. You might have a 18-year-old, right? So how does the 18-year-old address a full-grown man, right? Like, who could be his dad, right? So how is he gonna say to him, oh, coach, you're supposed to? He's probably not. So you just luck of the draw with conveners who you get, you know. As a league, you should have a competent person running that I would schedule all my tough games where I'm at. And I just assume, like, you know, when I have lower games that there shouldn't be a problem so the person can handle it, but, you know, not everyone.
Right. So I'm glad that Brian talked about doing a tournament and there's like 4 gyms and 1 convener, right? Is there a way of putting someone as an acting convener in those sites that you're not at? Reason being, like Denise saying, some parents sometimes can get out of control. We may be able to handle players and coaches, but we're not really supposed to interact with the fans. But that could get messy. Is there a way of doing something like that?
Yeah, again, so very quickly, so actually that was part of the conversation. So we are kind of all in uncharted territories, like with the amount of games and the game growing and things like that. So there is a process being kind of done on our end to ensure that there is at least one of the minor officials at the table would be acting site convener if the convener is at, like, you know, another gym that's, you know, on site, or he's not there at the moment. So yeah, so we are to answer your question, yeah, we are working towards that.
So, last question from myself. Okay, so, you know, we talked about communication, and so it starts from, like, the ground level, like, to the conveners, to the coaches, to the officials, things like that. My last question to you is, as an official, I come to you and there's a contentious call, and I tell you, you know what, I missed it. Like, what is your reaction? What would your reaction be if I said that to you?
From, you know, our end, whenever a referee goes up and just says, hey, sorry, I missed that call, like, okay. As long as it's, I think someone mentioned it before, you don't say 3, 4, 5 times, then you're like, well, you gotta do something about it now.
Yeah.
But as long as you own up to it, it's fine. As long as we know that you understand what we're seeing, might not be all the time, but
Right,
in
and
that case.
yeah, because there's different angles and things like that,
Absolutely.
and we miss calls, and you know what, and I've said to coaches, we just flat out miss it. And like, some coaches are like, you can't do that, and you know, I think us admitting that we make mistakes sometimes is not a bad thing, okay? Admitting that you missed a call is not a bad thing, just don't do it 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, when it's a blatant call and everyone kind of in the gym knows you missed it and you own up to it, then at least we know, okay, you did see what we saw, it was just a mistake, which happens, right?
And I think, like, believe it or not, there are some officials that think they never miss a call. And that's, you know what, and that's tough, and that's where egos come into. That's when your body language and your ego comes into account, and coaches can read that, right? Your nonverbal communication, coaches can read that. And, you know, just admitting that you miss a call is not a bad thing. Yes?
I just go back, so I agree with you. I think that that's the best way, and it ends the conversation really quick, because then what else can you argue? You might say, well, that's not gonna help me now, but it's pretty much, it finishes the conversation. Just to go back to this, can I go back to the irate parent thing, or are we?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like we should just put up like a wall. Like, not put up a physical wall like Donald Trump wall, but just like, I feel like we shouldn't just, don't even look over there, and don't listen. And that's, you know, there's people making money convening leagues and running leagues that should be dealing with that, and I feel like it's hard to have to now do something different, and I think that you get into trouble. I think the only thing that referees should do is deal with the players and the coaches and the table and the things that are within your control. And obviously, you want it to be a safe environment for everybody, but more dialogue needs to happen between the referee executives and the conveners. But also, we should start assigning, again, I'm talking like, because I refereed for 10 years, and the worst and the most difficult level is obviously U10, U11, U12 by far, because you have neurotic dad coaches that are coaching their own kid, that their kid can never, you know, do anything wrong. That's what happens at that level. Like, the dads are crazy, in my opinion. Kind of like hockey moms and basketball dads. I don't know which one is like more vocal. It's crazy. But I feel like adding some of the top officials to those games and those levels will be a huge advantage. It's easier to do a college game, in my opinion, or a university game, as compared to that environment. So, you know, not just putting your younger officials at that age because they're younger, because it's a way more difficult game.
So again, just with the angry parent, I do agree. We do need to put more onus on the conveners and the organizers. So if there is a situation, you know, let's just say at the Pan Am Center, there's a parent going on, I think it does need to be reported with the team. We can put in the game notes, let the convener know, and we need to take that information back. And I would be happy to take that back to OBA and say, hey, listen, you know, so-and-so, there was an issue, this parent was going crazy, and we need to reach out and say, hey, this can't continue. You know, if they want to tell their side of the story, that's great too. I mean, we can encourage that, but yeah, no, we definitely need to, you know, start righting those wrongs in that regard.
Like you have to be.
Yeah.
Come down and take comments.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think you need to let the convener know, like, you know, whoever's on site, like, you guys say, hey, listen, this is getting out of hand. For me, it's a little different at Pan Am. I can take them onto the track and they can watch them up there, so they're not bothering you guys. Not everyone has that luxury, but again, yeah, we definitely need to start righting those wrongs.
First of all, the last thing I want to say is I want to thank you all for taking our time. I mean, we all got a perspective on, you know, we get the other side of it. We get the convener side, we get the coach side. We talk about our communication, and we need to be professional, okay? We need to be professional as officials to make their job easier. But just you guys coming out has given, hopefully is giving you guys some new perspective on when we walk into a gym. I'd like to thank you very much for coming.